All right, everybody, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at SCL Mortgage. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn, at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here joined by a very special guest on a special occasion today. He is the King of Thornton himself, the host of the CSG Podcast, and good friend of mine, Jeff Morton. Jeff, how are you?
Oh, I am fantastic. I'm thankful we've had so much to talk about the last week and a half.
That we have. That we have. It's been quite a week in Nuggets Nation, and there's a lot of folks I think that have a lot of questions. Josh Kroenke, credit to him, spoke in front of the media today. I thought that it might have happened after or before Friday's game. It didn't happen that way, and I'm actually kind of glad that he did it this way, right in between, like right after the end of the regular season, before the beginning of the playoffs. Right. This was probably the right time for him to speak, but credit to him. A lot of other folks would probably duck out of this obligation, and he did not.
No, he didn't, and I'm glad that he went as long as he did, over a little over a half hour, and he answered as many questions as I thought were reasonable. And I thought that there was a few answers very specifically that I've found were very notable that we could talk about. But you were there. I mean, like, how was the vibe? I mean, what was it like being there? Was it I'm sure it wasn't akin to the post Tim Connolly press conference or anything like that. But
no, it was a little
no
different. This one was more kind of angry Josh, in terms of, I feel betrayed. I feel like this is a horrible situation for me personally and how it looks for me. This one was more serious, just in terms of, I know I have to be in front of the camera here and I have to answer all these questions. And this is something that was also just kind of embarrassing the way that it got to, but it was also like, I would say more serious between those two pressers and just how he handled himself. We're going to get into a lot of it. There's a lot of different things I think that we can talk about. Lots of good questions being asked. I thought that we did a pretty good job as a press contingent here, both asking like the needed questions, but also kind of digging into some of the juicier details that, like, there are clearly some things behind the scenes that Josh both wanted to talk about and was irritated to talk about. Lots of reports floating out there that he was disputing specifically. So where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with the Michael Porter Jr. stuff, which seems to be the ones that I know that CT Fazio has said that. I'm sorry, I said Fazio instead of Fazio.
Fazio, come on,
Fazio. Sorry, I need to get that right. I'm so sorry, CT. The MPJ stuff is kind of like a red herring. I understand it's probably something that got under Josh's skin because it goes directly to his credibility, that report. And I understand why he disputed that. He said that, first of all, he talked about Michael as a human, which is something that I think everyone in that organization has respect for MPJ as from what he has overcome, both physically and with his family. I think that has been a tribute to him.
Yeah.
But I do understand why Josh would feel the need to say, no, this is not true. We don't block. This is not how we do this. He said it was fault, but he also said very specifically the trade, quote unquote, he wasn't specific about that, wasn't good because we didn't have organizational alignment, which is a interesting explanation. I've put it to you.
I've got the direct quotes here. It says, quote, "I think that any kind of report saying that we're not open to trading everybody possible to improve the team is completely false. I don't know where that person got their sources from, and I'm surely not going to be greenlighting any trades around here when I don't see complete organizational cohesion and we're not maximizing the group we got. Okay. So a couple of things. Kind of an answer in both ways, I would say. I would say that there were trades that I think that were probably pushed across his desk and he was asked his opinion on that. And then he had a lot of things to think about and a lot of things to consider before making a massive move of that regard, breaking up the core four that had won Denver a championship. But just from my standpoint here, as somebody who has talked about this publicly, I feel like okay in my reporting in terms of that there were potentially things that were out there.
Yep.
And that there were things that Josh was not necessarily super excited about saying yes to at the time. But what he was disputing in that was that it wasn't that Michael Porter is an untradeable player because of his connections with Missouri, because of his relationship with Josh or anything like that. It was more so because it wasn't the right time and he didn't feel like it was the right call. And that is a different question. That's a different beast, I would say.
That's an interesting kind of approach to that. I mean, the Stein thing there was playing on a perception that is not new, by the way. It's been out there.
Yeah.
And I am not in a position to say whether it's accurate or not. I appreciate Josh disputing that notion. Like I said, it wasn't pulled out of thin air by Mark Stein. It's something that it's been a supposition, I should say, Josh and Stan, in regards to several Missouri players that have come through, very specifically Linus Kleza, and it's just been out there about that. Like I said, I'm not in a position to say whether it's true or false. I bet it's false, to be quite honest with you, but it's just been floating around, and it's part and parcel to the reputation sometimes you get as an owner and all this stuff. And it was just interesting to hear him talk about it because it's clearly something that got under his skin.
Yeah.
And it's probably the most notable. There's been a lot of things said about Josh Kroenke. It's probably the most notable thing that has gotten under his skin. Wouldn't you agree?
I would say so, especially recently. Obviously, we were talking about this like just a bit earlier, the distinguishing between this presser and the Tim Connolly presser. That one kind of got under his skin for a couple of different reasons, just because he talked about side doors and shark's teeth and things like that. That was an interesting way to frame those things. But just in general, I think that Denver trying to like they have these goals. They know how this thing is supposed to go. Josh knows how this thing is supposed to go, and it clearly wasn't going that direction. And so he knew he had to address some things today. And I've got another one here. Quote from Understanding that the situation was not tenable. Said, quote, maybe one specific thing that I didn't quite answer earlier was coming into the locker room after our Sunday night loss versus Indiana. I could feel how flat the room was. And, on a 4-game losing streak heading into the playoffs with a flat locker room, that was when I understood and I internalized how much I had let this room slip and that it was not up to standards of what Denver Nuggets basketball really is. Now, that was kind of when he made the final call. But he did also discuss that there were a couple of other instances that he had considered firing, not one, but both, of Michael Malone and Calvin Booth. One was around Thanksgiving to his knowledge, and the other was around the All-Star break. But he specifically talked about Denver being on a winning streak at that point. And then the first one, kind of a weird timing heading into that time of the calendar where there were reasons why Denver was starting slow.
Well, let me just throw this out there. Calvin Booth was, by all reporting, every single reporting, was offered a contract extension shortly before the season. And then a month later, Josh Kroenke was considering firing him.
Okay.
Let's just think about that for a second.
Yeah. Kind of a wild turn of events, I'll say. Things went from 100 to 0 really quickly.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
That is absolutely incredible. Just thinking of the timing of that. Because when did the Ramona Shelburne article come out? Was that in October?
Yeah, I think it was either right before the season started or right after the season started, but I think it was October.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking literally a month later. That is absolutely insane. I know people don't care about this sort of thing because it's like, to them, it's just intent to, it is what it is. But that is absolutely incredible to go from offering a guy an extension. He, by all the reporting, says no. And then a month later, Josh is saying, well, maybe I'll fire him. And that is just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It's one of those things that I think it's going to get kind of swept under the rug in all of this, but the timing of this has been wild. It has progressed very quickly in terms of going from, okay, now we're really happy with the way that this thing is going, to we are really not happy with the way that this thing is going. And it is interesting how quickly those things can turn on their head. What other things were kind of notable to you?
Well, actually, could you pull up SD's comment here? Because I think Josh addressed that too.
The like this Murray contract?
No. Below the SD, the last one at the bottom.
Yeah. SDs.
Okay. About getting a real all-star to play with. Josh seemed to be, that's another thing that seemed to rankle him a little bit.
Yeah.
The notion that he doesn't have an all-star, which is true.
Now, we didn't. He was pretty defensive of Jamal Murray in this presser. I'll say that. That was one thing that I thought was pretty fascinating. And he actually was pretty defensive of him, given the human situation, the human elements of it from this offseason, where he's working on a contract extension after. Okay, you go through a really tough playoffs. You then take some time off. You then get ready for the Olympics. You then have to take some time off before then in order to get yourself back and ready to go. And he talked about that as one of the reasons why he didn't fire Malone initially, was that he kind of knew that these guys were going to have to build up and play themselves into shape. And that's a phrase that has popped up with Jamal over the course of these past couple of years, playing yourself into shape and putting yourself into a situation later in order to win. And that, look, we'll see how it goes with Jamal. Like, I'm very curious to see how he handles his business and what he's able to do. If he is a all-star caliber, kind of playoff caliber, like playoff Jamal caliber player, then it justifies a comment like this where, okay, you've got guys that are like, hey, all-star caliber when it counts, mentally tough, doing like rising to the occasion as opposed to faltering. But if it doesn't happen that way, then you start to have some uncomfortable conversations because it'll be the second year in a row.
It's interesting. There were a lot of little notable things, and that one stood out to me just because it's like it's another thing, he's commenting on it because he's aware of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it very specifically has to go with, a guy who just signed a max extension for your franchise, and that's Jamal Murray. And you can see why that would be something that he would push back on. And it was fascinating to me to see these moments where you could tell very specifically that Josh probably wanted to say certain things. And I think that was one of them. Also, but you are right, Ryan, to point out that he did mention guys playing themselves into shape. There's only one person on the roster. You can
like how many? Because he mentioned Olympics specifically. Like,
right?
He clearly wasn't talking about Jokic in that regard. He wasn't talking about Vlatko. Like, there's only one other guy that you can really talk about in that regard.
Yes, that's 100% true. And I was like, wow, interesting. It was interesting. But you know what the most notable thing that come out of this presser was? Him talking about the GM search.
Ben Tenzer.
Ben Tenzer's the interim guy. But the most notable thing is Josh admitting that he needed to be open-minded. And that to me expresses a willingness for them to maybe alter some of their past habits with finding general managers, which is huge.
Elaborate on that. What would you describe as the Nuggets' past habits in finding GMs?
Past habits have been let's look for the ultimate. Let's look for the up and coming scout / assistant GM. And look, Calvin Booth was renowned as a scout. And that was his primary role when Tim Connolly was here. Even when Arturas Karnisovas was here, his primary role was to be a scout. And that's what Tim Connolly was. And Masai Ujiri was. And those are the guys who have been under Josh. Basically, the Josh has been responsible for every guy since Masai Ujiri. And then Josh looking at himself and saying, I have to be open to everything was very, very notable. Because that to me, and knowing Josh as long as I have since 2009, 10, that's the first time I've seen a willingness for him to acknowledge the Nuggets are not in the same spot. And maybe we can't keep hiring GMs like we're still a growing team. And we need a hungry up and coming scout or assistant GM as a general manager / team president / vice president. And that to me was by far, at least to me, the most to my ears as someone who's been covering the Nuggets for as long as I have, by far the most notable thing Josh said, because that will shape the future of this team more than anything else.
100%. Like you need a guy in there that is going to be making those decisions. And we've talked about this before with regard to Bob Myers as somebody that they might consider that has been rumored / reported. That he's a guy who has connections in the league. He's a guy who, like in that aspect of being a GM, has already built a championship team before, has already established connections both as an agent and as a general manager, and isn't somebody who's like working into this situation the first time and is already comfortable in his own skin in terms of what he does. So I'm like, look, if he would like to pay that kind of guy for what it's going to have to take in order to get somebody like that in the building, I would fully sign off on it personally as somebody that thinks that you need somebody who knows what they're doing and has already been put into this position before, and not somebody just playing with the new car that they just got.
And I think it takes sometimes the Kroenkes to be having a situation like we've had the last week in order for them to maybe think, okay, well, maybe we need to change direction. It's happened before. So I'm very curious about that. That's the thing that hit my ears. You know, I just hear like I said, because I've known Josh for so long, I kind of just, the Shark's Tooth press conference was, notable for how defensive he was. But this and in the postseason presser last year, you remember sitting between Booth and Michael Malone, and it was like this step down in height thing that they had going there. And this
really funny.
It was so funny, but it was this dour. It was this kind of almost like tense, depressing press conference.
Oh, like part of it is because you know that like you just know that it's not going to be a comfortable situation after you lose following winning a championship. Like it's everybody at that point had been talking about repeat, do what it takes, do what you got to do. And then when you fail, like, I'm not surprised that it was a dour thing, but like in retrospect, probably a little bit more negative and dour than it should have been in that situation.
Well, he was sitting between them because, those two were getting along
next to each other.
and then Josh somehow, for some reason, gave him an extension and offer, and then something I still can't figure out. But it's very interesting, and and I see it in your rundown, and I'm sure we'll get to it. But the Jokic being consulted is another thing that kind of, and by consulted, he didn't go that far, but
yeah, no. Let me read the quote. There are a few other things, but the bulk of it is on how involved Jokic will be in the search. Quote, I'd be the dumbest guy in basketball if I wasn't asking him for his opinion on certain things. But it's my responsibility to make those decisions for the best of the organization. And I think he understands that and respects that very much. Consulted is an interesting word phrase that I used and probably kind of regret putting that on the main topic rundown. But I do think that he will be asked about like what he would like, what the kinds of people and players and organization and then things that he would value, like what he thinks makes sense. My general feeling on Jokic's involvement in terms of running the team, in terms of running the organization, is like he just wants to be part of something good. And he wants to feel that confidence, I think, that the organization is pulling in the right direction and doing the things that it's supposed to be doing. In terms of who is running it and what is being done, he doesn't care about that as much, as long as he can see that things are operating at a high level. Yeah. And I don't see him as being a guy that's going to be like, okay, get me Bob Myers. Like that's not what he's going to do.
No. Let's put it to you this way. I think the organization has been guilty post Tim Connolly. And I say Tim Connolly probably was too deferential to fitting and getting everything around Jokic to a point where I think that he needed a different perspective. And that's what we got with Calvin Booth. Okay. Even though Calvin Booth was here under Connolly, there was just like Calvin had a different point of view. And it benefited them that first season post Tim Connolly. But I think the organization has been guilty of kind of like not aligning itself enough with your best player.
Yeah.
I think that has been, at least the last 2 years, I think that's definitely been the case. And it should have been, I think, like an interesting thing for everyone when Jokic was part of the decision-making with Russell Westbrook. It's probably been overstated how much he advocated for Russell Westbrook, but he was part of that decision-making. And that was one of the first notable times that we can think of that at least post 2022 that's happened.
Yeah.
I think there's a nice balance between being too deferential and not deferential enough. And I think they swung way too much in Booth's area, which he was starting to make moves that I don't think necessarily benefited having Jokic. I mean, to be honest with you, the lack of shooting was egregious. And
also the lack of perimeter defense was pretty egregious too.
Losing your 3-and-D guy and not replacing him with a guy with a similar skill set, or at least attempting to, was bad. And I think that sort of thing is something that the team hurt the team. And then it became, from all the reporting, it became like a battle of egos between the two of them and philosophies. And we saw what happened. So, I mean, I do think that aligning in anything that makes Nikola Jokic's life easier, not harder.
Yeah.
They need to do what it takes to make his life easier. And that makes it so much easier to have an offense that makes sense and not easy to guard like they've been this year. And on the flip side, generally it makes situation, which is what they need to get better at, situational defense much better.
We should have asked him as well if they would be willing to go into the second apron. Like, is that a hard and fast line?
Yeah.
He would never say yes. He would never, even if it is true, like, yeah. But like he would never say it out loud. Never really cop to that or admit to that. But no, it is interesting, and I think that Jokic, and so it's funny the timing of this thing, because we're about to go through a playoff run. We're about to actually, like, for what this all was building up to, we're about to experience that, and it's going to be kind of 1 foot in the present, 1 foot in the future in terms of where this Nuggets organization is. And it's a really uncomfortable place. So I'm curious to see what, like, David Adelman's able to do, if he's going to get a serious look at the job next. I think, honestly, between Adelman and Ben Tenzer, I think that Adelman is more likely to be the next head coach of the Nuggets than Tenzer is to be the next GM of the Nuggets. But like, I don't know if either is going to be the guy. And I think a lot of it depends on what happens over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Unless there is a Ty Lue type run from David Adelman, it's my opinion that you have to be very leery about re-signing the interim.
Yeah.
Because there's a psychology here, and there's two things that work: small sample size and psychology. And players, when they have a fever break like they had with Malone, and I got to be honest with you, it had been building for 3 years with Malone. He's been getting just that he only has one gear, and that is 100. I mean, that is him at all times. It's amazing he lasted as long as he did. Most guys who run that hot generally burn themselves out sooner. But what happened was, Adelman coming in, one thing I've noticed with him is that he stays out of Jokic's way. And he does that a lot more than Malone. He is kind of like let Jokic kind of do his thing at the end of games, which is good, which is what you need him to do. But you're not going to get a big enough sample size, in my view. I'm speaking for myself here. And you're not going to get a big enough sample size with Adelman to really judge how he would do over 82 games.
Of course.
And I think this is the problem. Beware the interim, is that a lot of times I've told people JB Bickerstaff's has made an entire career out of being the interim coach and then getting hired and then getting fired. It's happened twice with him. And then he was an interim coach under the Rockets. I mean, it happens. And I think people need to observe what David Adelman's doing, but understand if you hire David Adelman, essentially what you're doing is not letting your GM make the coaching hire. And I'm very leery of that. You need organizational alignment from the top to the bottom. And the Nuggets haven't had that. And I don't want the Nuggets getting into a situation where whoever they hire as a GM is forced to take on David Adelman, even if he doesn't want him. And that's a dangerous territory. It's fine.
So they're going to be in a situation now where they have to, they probably got to move pretty fast on this GM. They probably have to make it as quickly as they possibly can without rushing, I guess. But like, if you identify a good visionary for what the team should be going forward, then you probably just have to capitalize on that as soon as possible and do what you need to set the rest of the wheels in motion, because there's a lot of things that are going to have to happen this offseason. I assume that Denver's not going to win the championship. I kind of assume that there's a world where they don't get out of the first round. There's a world where they get out of the first round and then get blown out by the OKC Thunder. And if either of those two things happen, then yeah, you're going to be seeing some major changes on all three levels between coaching, GM, and roster. Like it has to happen.
Right.
And I'm curious to see where it goes from here. But anything else you want to cover from this presser?
No, I think we got it. But I think this was just to me it was enlightening. Maybe it's because I'm a Nuggets dork, but I just found it fascinating watching him. That's easily Josh Kroenke's best press conference that he's given. That I will say it's easily at the top by far. He did well. He handled the questions well. He didn't come off as defensive. He got the points of contention out without being too defensive about him and all that stuff. I thought he did a good job.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear it. And I do agree. I think that I thought it was handled pretty well. And I thought that he addressed pretty much everything that the Nuggets needed to address. There's some minutia that slips through the cracks because you only have 30 minutes, but just in general, I thought that good questions asked, good questions answered. And hopefully now it starts the process of things moving forward. So
right.
We'll see what happens, but tell you what, let's take a break really quick. And then we come back. I'm going to do a quick ad read, and we will then get into Nuggets Clippers, which in all this, I was going to do a podcast on game 82 of the regular season, but then I got a notice that Josh Kroenke was going to speak. So we have a different priority set here,
right?
for Pickaxe and Roll. So just trying to make it happen. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we will speak about Nuggets Clippers. All right. I have put Jeff in timeout right now so I can talk about SCL Mortgage. Gotta love what SCL Mortgage has brought to the table for us here at Mile High Sports. They've been such a fantastic company for us to trust, for us to be able to send customers to. You need a great mortgage company that you can trust. Are you self-employed? Do you need a down payment on a new home, second mortgages, whatever? SCL Mortgage is the right mortgage company for you. Hundreds of happy customers, a 5-star reputation. They specialize in loans for self-employed people and also in like dire situations and circumstances. They really absolutely help those, whether you have unusual financing needs as well as those that just have great credit and would like to get a good deal. So make sure to head over to SCL Mortgage and contact them 303-790-2222 or visit myspecialmortgage.com. That's 303-790-2222 and let them know that you came from Mile High Sports. We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Hello, Jeff. Pickaxe and Roll here. Ryan Blackburn, thank you so much for tuning into the show. You like how smooth that was? I feel like I handled that reasonably well.
Well, that was great. It's wonderful. It's funny. I don't know any people in the comments. Do people even know who I am? I was curious.
All right, get a quick poll in the chat here. How many of you know who this guy is? Like he's very instrumental to my growth as a member of Nuggets Media and somebody that I definitely like really helped. Has helped me through this. But so Marco here says, says no,
no, nope. Saw him once.
Saw him.
Yeah, I know him from X.
Heard him before. Fantastic.
I tell you, I was always surprised that anyone knows. Anyone? Oh, here we go. There we go.
Jeff Morton, the GOAT from Chris. It truly is like people don't know, but Jeff was the one who basically started Denver Nuggets blogging, like just in general. It was a big deal. He started off with Fire George. You weren't with FireGeorgeCarl.com.
No, that was Andy Feinstein, and then Nate Timmons was at Pickaxe and Roll.
Yep. Shout out.
The namesake of this podcast. And those combined, and I joined in 2009, and we were that's my blogging days began 16 years ago.
Holy cow. That's you're old enough to buy a car. It's crazy.
I know. Well, at least drive one.
Drive a car. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, hey, glad to have you on, and like especially with a conversation like this one where you have perspective on Josh Kroenke, you have perspective on the entire Nuggets organization over a long period of time. You're the right person that I wanted to talk to here because it's valuable, I think, to get kind of that perspective of where Josh was to where he is now and kind of how the Nuggets organization has run things through and through. And we'll see how it takes care of itself. But for now, I'm being pinged. Yeah. Okay. No, never mind. We're good. Yeah. Being pinged for other responsibilities, but it's not going to happen. Let's do Nuggets Clippers. Let's do Nuggets Clippers.
That was just smooth. That was one of the smoothest things I've ever seen, right?
No. No, it was not. Great. Initial thoughts when you found out yesterday that the Nuggets were going to play the Clippers, what was the first thing you thought?
It's going to be a really, really, really tough series. The Clippers have been playing great. They play great defense, except for yesterday. And I think that they have some of the key ingredients that are struggles for the Denver Nuggets, i.e., good to great perimeter defenders, and Ivica Zubac, who can guard Jokic one-on-one. And though that combination has been the Nuggets' bugaboo, and that's sort of like the Timberwolves. It's sort of, they don't do it the same way, I'll be honest with you, but they it's similar enough due to their positional strengths that it worries me, because the Nuggets are just, despite their recent good play, they're not fully formed. They're kind of amorphous at this point, because I don't sense them all the way there. They played a Houston Rockets team yesterday that, let's face it, probably wasn't trying that hard. They were just trying to get some reps in before the playoffs. So I am actually very nervous about this one. I'm not picking them to lose. I'm not going to do that until the end of the week. Not make a prediction, I should say, not just put prediction to lose. So no offense to anyone. That's not what I was saying. But I think that I am very worried about their strengths. On the flip side, the Clippers have James Harden, so that's their kryptonite. So I mean, at this point, it's like
pretty reasonable. Pretty reasonable. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle themselves. I tend to think, and you are right, that the Clippers and Timberwolves do share some similarities on the defensive fronts. I tend to think, and I look at the defenders that the Clippers have versus the ones that the T-Wolves have as more technically sound, but less physically gifted, and less of the, like, we are physically in your face and going to dominate you with our athleticism.
Right.
And like also the mentality. The Nuggets don't feel the same way against the T-Wolves that they felt against the Clipper or they felt against. Okay, let's try this again. The Nuggets don't feel the same way against the Clippers that they feel against the Timberwolves, in terms of just how much like that physical matchup bothers them.
Right.
It's pretty clear to me that Gobert is one of those guys that, yes, they believe that they can win against, but also they have a lot of respect for him and the defense that he plays when it's like, especially when anybody else is around the rim against him. Like, they'll attack Zubac, and maybe that's to their detriment, because Zubac, I think, is very good. But in terms of like Chris Dunn versus Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels versus Derek Jones Jr. and current Kawhi Leonard, I think I feel pretty different in terms of how Denver can attack that defense, given that they are less athletic than the T-Wolves are.
Oh, no, I agree with that. I think one of the biggest issues, and this is something that's going to probably surprise people, I don't think the Wolves are in the Nuggets' heads. I think the Nuggets' problem with the Wolves is they don't respect them enough. And I've always felt that. I feel like the Nuggets feel like they should beat them every time, and they don't actually have. I could tell in that series last year, they were surprised that they were down. They lost those first two games. You could see it in Jamal just freaking out, and in game two, and it was like, no, we should be beating these guys, and it was like happening to them, and they weren't processing it. And I think that same thing happened this year, because I could guarantee you the Nuggets were convinced that the only reason they lost to the Timberwolves is because they were tired. You could tell that's the entire way they operated this season. And I think they needed to have a more healthy respect for the Timberwolves. And once they get to that mental place, they'll be able to adjust. I just look at the Nuggets, and they aren't there. Now, on the flip side of that, they're very confident against the Clippers. Even though they've lost 2 games to the Clippers this year, they were early in the season. Jamal was, let's face it, crap early in the season. And I think by the third meeting, Jamal was injured. I think, was Jamal even there for the third meeting?
I don't remember. I need to I need to go back and look. Given all the stuff that has happened over the course of this last 24 hours, I just haven't even considered looking at the other matchups.
I think that was the first Clippers victory came when Jamal was injured. I think it was with Russ. I think. And then they added that extra game at the play-in tournament. And
you're wrong.
I am.
So that third game, Denver blew them out. It was a big win that they were able to get.
Right.
It was tied basically at the end of the first half, but the Nuggets were able to really take it too. I wonder, like, do you remember when the fires were in LA?
Yeah, that was January, right?
Okay, so I remember the fourth matchup, the Clippers kind of being despondent in that matchup because their families were literally evacuating and they were trying to figure out how to handle that entire situation. And so I remember them coming in and it just was not anywhere close to their best effort in that fourth one.
Yeah.
And so, but Murray played in the third one. He had 20 points, 3 assists, 4 steals, and a block. Was pretty good defensively. And Russell Westbrook was 2 of 9 coming off the bench, but he was also a plus 21. So who knows?
I misremembered. That'll happen to you when you reach almost 50, like me.
It's already happening, buddy.
So I think that just the Nuggets don't have the mental supposition they have with the Timberwolves with the Clippers. It's a different scenario, but it still won't Nuggets team, boy, blah, 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 blah. I can talk.
How's it feel now?
You can laugh at me. I think the Nuggets can and should be able to beat the Clippers, but every single series in the Western Conference, save for the Oklahoma City, whoever they play, is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. I mean, look at the Rockets. I mean, they're probably playing the Golden State Warriors. I can guarantee you that's not going to be a cakewalk for them, and I would pick the Warriors, to be honest with you, in that series, if depending on Jimmy Butler's. So every single series is going to be, other than the Oklahoma City one, is going to be tough. So
yeah, all of these are going to be intense. Just Kawhi Leonard never played in any of these games. We're getting comments from the comment section basically saying Kawhi is saying that he feels the best he's ever felt. And guys lie all the time in that situation. It just wouldn't surprise me if Kawhi was lying. It wouldn't surprise me if he was feeling great. We don't know. Like, he is a complete wild card in this situation, despite the fact that he is in general a very good playoff contributor when he is healthy. So I'm curious to see how Denver matches up with their offense. Do you think that Michael Porter Jr. is going to be hunted into oblivion by James Harden?
I mean, I'm not as worried about that as I am Norm Powell.
Okay.
Because for whatever reason, Norman Powell tends to cook the Denver Nuggets. So
that dude kicks them. He just kicks their butts. I'm
not worried about James Harden. And Harden is a different thing altogether. If he gets his, he gets his. I'm worried about Norm Powell. And if Stormin' Norman Powell gets over on the Nuggets, and he has, remember that's, what was it, game 2 against the Nuggets, where he had like 40 points.
I'm looking at averages right now in these games. He is averaging 27.8 points per game.
Insane.
2.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 70% true shooting, but just is an absolute flamethrower against Denver.
And that a lot of that was on Christian and Jamal,
because I remember them like a lot of it to me, like Christian did let go of the rope at times. But the matchups that I'm thinking of are the ones where Christian is stuck guarding James Harden, which means that somebody else has to guard Powell. And if that's the case, you're probably looking at Murray guarding and chasing around Powell in this situation. Right. And Michael Porter guards Chris Dunn and Aaron Gordon guards Kawhi.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel great.
I think AG can do well with Kawhi, because Kawhi's not fast. And AG, at least this year, has been doing better against guys who aren't fleet of foot, so to speak.
Yeah.
I worry about Jamal a lot, because Jamal, it really is the point of attack for most teams. Because most teams are guard heavy, and that's it. They will get Mike into situations where he gets caught on a switch, and they'll cook him. And his recovery ability isn't tremendous because, let's face it, he's a very injured 6'10" guy who wasn't fast anyway. And then he will get caught on like lack of awareness with going to the corner and all this stuff.
And you can live with that if he's making his shots, but this is a series where I could see them really starting to go with Russell Westbrook and Peyton Watson a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can at least Peyton Watson, and I'll be honest with you, David Alleman's kind of showed you what he's going to do with the playoffs, and that rotation doesn't really include Zeke Naji, does it? The power forward, let's say, the person that Calvin Booth said, I've always said that he was a power forward. So
good for him.
Good for him.
Would Zeke care to play well at center? Is my general response to that. It's insane. Like I just don't get it. So it's going to be an interesting series. I'm going to be predicting that the Nuggets win it. The degrees, how much, I'm not sure yet. I'm leaning 6, maybe 7. But this is a close series. This is one where Denver's going to have to be, they're going to be tested immediately. And there's no doubt that, they'll lose one of these games because they just can't stop, Norman Powell and Kawhi Leonard and some of those guys. And, the Clippers will shoot well enough in a game. But they'll also probably lose a game because Denver's not shooting well enough. And guys, they just don't have enough outside shooters, and that's going to be a tough situation for them to come down to.
Is Batum starting or coming off the bench for them?
Batum he may not play at all. Really? He's not coming out. He's not starting. That's for sure. They will start James Harden, Chris Dunn, Norman Powell, Kawhi Leonard, Zubac. That's who they'll start. But Batum hurt himself. He was holding on to either his heel or his ankle or something like that. And I'm not sure how ready he's going to be for a playoff series. So Batum would flip things for me, but I don't think that he's going to be there.
Because he's actually pretty good on Mike. So I that's one of the things. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I may, as usual, I'm making you go along on your podcast.
That's okay. No, I think we should probably cut it here, because I don't want to talk to you anymore. Just
as well you should.
Oh my gosh, no. Jeff is extremely important in my growth as somebody who covers the Nuggets. And folks, you should make sure to go follow the CSG podcast. It's what Jeff does, and he always brings a fresh perspective, somebody who he doesn't always have to maintain strong connections in the media room specifically. So he's able to say things that he thinks. And that is, I think, really valuable. So everybody make sure to go follow the CSG pod.
Oh, well, thank you. And on Twitter, I'm at JMorton78, and at Blue Sky, it's JMorton78.bluesky, blah, blah, blah. So
yeah, I haven't been on Blue Sky in months. If you guys want me to hop back on Blue Sky, then let me know, because it's hard for me to maintain one social media, and I
don't blame you.
Instagram is this foreign land, and TikTok I have never traversed before, so trying to figure it out.
What's a TikTok? Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, hey, that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, everybody. Brought to you by our good friends over at SCL Mortgage. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the way out, and we're definitely going to have Jeff back on and talk about the offseason. There's plenty that will be discussed. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys very soon.